I'm just going to use this page because we're just messing around and testing, but this is where we got to before, where we were setting up like a header component and then sections, which are full width and containers inside. And then we just have a couple of containers. What I'll do now is I'll make this API call and then just change one of these values at first to come from the API response, and then we can build on that from there. And to do that, I'll make it actually, I'll make it so when you click hero, it'll do the API call and then update features maybe. And this is kind of actually an example of how I test stuff sometimes too. Like if I just want to test this API call and I have stuff on here, I'll just make something clickable and something show the response. It's a quick way to kind of set some tests up. So I have this, it's an IP address, but that returns JSON, but it's essentially the same exact thing as an API. Like you can use it in the same way. So I'm going to use Bildr's API call action. So I'll make a new flow to actually call the API. That way I can call this wherever I want. And inside of there, I'll just add the generic API call action. So I just search API call. And so an API call is really just like, when you're talking about a get API call, it's the same as like requesting a website. So basically, this URL here,
I did that.
Maybe like that. That URL here is going to return a JSON.js file. It's going to return JSON, but it's the same thing as doing an API call. So that's why I'm using the API action. It's going to go out to this URL, and then whatever the response is, in this case, it's going to set it in a variable called API response by default. So basically the Bildr is going to have a variable called API response that is the JSON of whatever's in this file, json.js. So this is a way that you can take that, just take outside information into Bildr basically. And then, so I'll have a API response variable, and then I'll just set that set value because I just want to display it. And then, like I said, we can build on this afterwards. So I'm going to change the element features to be API. Well, for now, I'm going to write API response, but we're going to parse into that. And then in between these, so I want to make sure that the API call goes out, gets a response, sets in a variable before I try to use that variable. So I'm just going to click the don't wait and make it wait in between. But that's pretty much all I'd have to do to initially run this API call and set the response. The last step is I'll just, on this hero, I'll just trigger it. So I'll go to events, and on the click, I can run the call API flow. And actually, maybe before I call it too, we can just look at it so we know what we're expecting. So what we're expecting is a top level of remote with some properties in it. And so actually I set this features, it might not even show up because it's going to be, it's going to be JSON formatted, but I'll watch the network request so we can see if it worked or not. So here, if I don't know if you caught that, but you right click anywhere and go to inspect, you'll open this inspector. And then if you go to this network tab, you can actually watch when you're testing API calls, you can watch for a network request that's called HTTP call. So if this works, we'll see it as soon as I click on this hero and it triggers that API action. So I click, you can see HTTP call over here. I forgot to make this variable, so just type the word API response in there. But here, just what I was talking about with this HTTP call, you can click on this and you can actually, under headers, you can see what you're sending out. So I'm sending it to this URL. I mean, there's nothing in this one. It was a very simple request. But if it's more complex, you can kind of make sure it's the right thing here. And then preview will show you the response. So it came back 200 OK, and I can see this JSON in here, which is the same as this. So what I did wrong in that flow is I said element set value, and I did value of text and just typed API response. What I meant to do was a variable API response. And if you note here, so I use this API call action and it creates an API response variable, just a small kind of like almost a little gotcha. when I went into this value for the variable, API response did not show up in the list. See, just URL param is showing up. Just to know, you can just type API response. Even if it doesn't show up in the list, if you know it's a variable, it'll work. It's actually there. We do our best to populate that list, but the variables get set all over the place, so you never know. So this will correctly set into here, but that element is not going to take all that JSON. So kind of like a step 2 as a test, I'll pop a text area in here. And this is another little thing I do. If I just want to see something, a text area can actually show you the JSON response. So I'll just update my API call set value. Instead of features, we'll update this text area. So now I should click on here. Oh, so if I click here, oh, it's not working. It might be because of this JSON callback. That might be causing an issue here. I don't know if Mark or Dorian, if you've run into this before, but I think that might be like JSON P, where you wrap it in a function, and then when you actually call the API, you have to somehow call the function, but I don't remember off the top of my head. So that actually might be tripping us up. I didn't see that when I originally looked at this.
What is this API? What is this?
It's a radio status, remote radio status. And it just basically shows what frequency on, who's on it, and really only the last 5 elements of the thing are the things. Oh, it actually shows it broke out here. This is different. You see the list there, driver, frequency, mode, meter, login. That's the stuff we're looking for right there.
So Drew, the issue you're saying, the issue is you're thinking it's not getting through that JSON P or callback because that's part of the response.
Yeah, it's like so JSON P is like it's a, I don't know what you call it. It's like a standard. It's like to do cross origin, like if it's a different URL. So basically, when you make the API call, if you know it's going to be JSON P formatted, you pass in this callback function. I could try it. I don't exactly know how it works. Let me try it. You basically just say like something like this, like callback equals this function, and then it works. But I don't remember exactly. And actually, I haven't seen that in a long time. Like it used to be like almost a standard years ago. Yeah, that didn't work. So I don't know. I've never actually dealt with it in Bildr. So I might not be able, this might not work right now. I mean, I'm sure there's a way. It's really, you just have to tell it what that callback is. It actually might be like this. And I'm just probably getting the formatting wrong. I'll look it up.
This is the kind of stuff that you deal with APIs all the time.
Exactly.
We say this stuff fairly regularly, but every API is different. And especially like, depending on sort of like the generation of the API, if it was created 15 years ago or 5 years ago or yesterday, it's very different best practices.
Oh yeah, callback equals data type. Oh, data type. It's probably, I have to do a couple of things, I think, to get this working. I don't know if this is interesting or if I should keep going on this, but like,
Well,
basically I have to tell it the callback, and then I have to do,
if it would be more appropriate for the group as a whole to just, maybe we could dig into this in the Bildr Hours thing during the week.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we can definitely get this working though.
cover something more modern, up to date. It's fine with me. At least I know I wasn't the only one that couldn't figure out how to get this thing to work right. So I'd get it partially, but it just wasn't going.
And Drew, I'm going to mute and turn my video off for a minute. Lars just reported an issue. It looks like it's only in the EU that's happening. So I'm going to go work with devs real quick and see if we can get it resolved. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Drew, just, this was helpful to this point. Why don't you move on to some other stuff, and I'll ping you during the week.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks.
what should I move on to? That's the question.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know if this would be something to move on to, but it's really less of a question about actually building and more about how to think about building.
Yeah.
There's a possibility maybe you might be able to show something, but I wanted to at least describe what we're trying to build.
Cool.
Okay. I don't know if I think my co-founder, I think, Lee, are you on the call? I think he's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, so Drew, Lee and I are building LaunchStash, mylaunchlaunchstash.com. And basically, we're creating a platform for people to save money with their referral links. The way the platform works is you add your products, those are stashes, and then your stashes have a referral link, and other information associated with them. Those stashes are associated with the user, and then you can group your stashes into what are called stacks, like a project or like a curation of things. Anyways, where Bildr comes in is that we've already built a very dirty like MVP of a Chrome extension using Michael Gill's tutorial. So the good news is that we know that we can build an extension, a Chrome extension with Bildr. The question here is this: we're building the web app Bildr we've built it on Bubble, and now we're building the Chrome extension in Bildr. Ideally, what we would like to have happen is when someone downloads the extension, we want them to be able to link their use of the extension with a user account in Bubble. What we thought about, and this was suggested to us, was basically creating a random key in Bubble that when someone downloads the extension, they can then go and put in that key, and it somehow associates them with their user profile in our web app on Bubble. My question is, how else can we be thinking about working with this, paradigm of the extension, working, Chrome extension, working with Bubble? Because we also want to do things such like maybe enabling social signing in the extension.
Yeah. Do you are the users like already working in Bubble, like they're Bubble users? And
Yes.
okay.
Well, right now they are Bubble builders, and we have a database of users, a database of their stashes, their stacks. And so the question, actually, let me let Lee take over and tell you what the extension is now able to do. Lee, can you jump in?
I mean, yeah, hi. So we've set it up as Edmund says, following Michael's tutorial. So we've got it plugged into Bubble, so you can stash product and it will populate to the app on Bubble. What we haven't got is connecting that stash with a particular user. So one way we thought about doing it was connecting it with a person's Twitter URL, but aware that there could be security issues if it's just their Twitter they could log in through Twitter on the Chrome extension and be logged into my LaunchStash with Twitter, but aware that could cause security issues or allow people to hack in maybe.
I mean, that actually is one thing I was thinking as you're describing. I was like, maybe one way to do that is to just sign both in with Twitter, because you would know their Twitter handle, you would know their email if you ask for that permission,
Yeah.
So you could actually like link them up. I mean, but the thing is, they wouldn't necessarily be talking to each other at that point. Like you wouldn't be, if you want to save something in the extension, it would only be able to save to Bildr, not to Bubble. And what I don't, and maybe you don't need that, but what it sounded like is that's the ultimate goal would be to kind of like talk to each other, for Bildr and Bubble to talk to each other two-way, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know Bubble's like what Bubble offers API wise. If Bubble has an API that is the other, the other people can modify Bubble data, then Bildr would be able to use it. So basically Bildr would be able to add to people's users on Bubble. And that would probably get you 90% of the way there, it sounds like.
Yeah, we did have it working with the Twitter URL. So we had it where we were putting the Twitter URL in, and then it will publish all the data into Bubble, and Bubble then recognizes the Twitter URL. We haven't set up the auth side of things on Bildr yet, but it was able to recognize the Twitter URL.
I mean, that might work then if I don't know. I don't actually know if I didn't think through the security wise. So I don't know how, what people would do with that, but I feel like it actually would be fine if you're authenticating with Twitter in Bubble and then you're authenticating with Twitter in Bildr, that you can't really fake that, or probably can, but it'd be hard to.
So Mark, I said Mark, Drew. So just basically, so with the Chrome extension, first question, with the Chrome extension, it's possible to sign in with Twitter and save that in Bildr, save the user, the URL, save the username, save the email, whatever we get. And then you're saying if Bubble's API, is open, and I know in our apps they allow us to create our own APIs for other things to talk to it.
Oh, there you go.
Then we can create an API, I guess, a bridge between Bildr and Bubble to allow Bildr, the Bildr Chrome extension, to write to the database that we're opening up.
Yeah, exactly. And just so you know, too, the Bildr Chrome extensions, like there's something that's like a container pops up, but once it does, whatever's inside that container, that's like just a normal Bildr project. So you have everything that you can do in Bildr, you can do in there, which means you can create the users, you can auth with Twitter, and you can send APIs.
Okay, thank you. I think that helps us out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll come back to office hours when we get stuck again.
Yeah. No, that'd be cool to build through it just to see it working too. Because I never even thought about if Bubble had a data API. When you're first saying that, I was like, oh, I don't even know if they do. But it's kind of a cool use case. Any other questions? I see Dorian, you're back. Does that mean the problem's okay? No.
I guess you know what? I guess if the room doesn't mind, if you've already done this before, I can go find a video. Can we look at the Twitter like social sign-in and using the Twitter like API to pull additional information?
Yeah. So I don't know, actually, we probably wouldn't be able to fully pull additional information, but we can do the sign-in and see what we can get and see if I don't know if we can modify that. I know like we're in Discord, we're trying to pull some additional Twitter information and there's like more involved. But this sign-in will get you, I think you can actually probably get more than we get from it. So we'll see. So to do it, basically so in Bildr, this project has no users or anything, but there is a default users table. Like there's always a default users collection in Bildr. When you use the Twitter sign-in, you're basically going to drop a Twitter sign-in button. It's an element. But in your app, when someone clicks it, it takes them to Twitter, they authenticate, or if they're already signed in, they just click, allow permissions or whatever. Then it's going to come back to Bildr and it's going to create a Bildr user but the Bildr user has a unique identifier and knows it's that Twitter user. So what you're actually doing is you're signing in with Twitter, so they don't have to type their email or even give you their email necessarily, but it creates a Bildr user. That way you can use it in Bildr like you would use anything else. It's just that you don't have to actually have them sign up or have them give you their email address. So you can just go to Elements, search for Twitter. There's a sign in, there's a Twitter share button, which is more like if you had a blog post, you click to share on Twitter. That's not what we want. We want this sign in with Twitter. I'll just put it here. And then, oh, I forgot, actually, I do have to set up some like API key stuff. I forgot all about that side. Maybe what I can do, I can just show you how this works. Okay. So this is the Twitter, this is the original pattern to make the Twitter button. And the reason I came here is because you need to set a few API keys and stuff for it actually to work. But what it is you drop the button like I just did, which is here. And then you attach an action to it. So this pattern outlines some instructions, and there's a video, a lesson in here. If you go down to this question mark that shows you, walks you through doing this too. But basically there's a couple actions. So there's a step one where they click the button and then it does something, takes them to Twitter. And then when it comes back to a new page that does a step two action. So I've got the button under events. I've got it tied to sign in with Twitter step one. And that comes with, like, when you drop the button, you get this action into your project. So you just drop this action on, and there's a bunch of things to set here. There's a consumer API key, a secret key, a Twitter access token, and a token secret. So this all comes from Twitter. So you have to actually go to Twitter, sign up as a developer, and then that lets you create your Twitter account, like your developer project. And then what's happening is when people are signing into Twitter, they're actually talking to your developer project. Like it's not hard, but it's tedious. Like you have to go through and set everything up, but you're just following instructions. It's just like app name, saying what the app does, that kind of stuff. So anyway, you set all that up and it gives you these secrets. So if I look at my secrets in this project, I have 4 for Twitter. And you just need all those in order to sign in with Twitter. So I have them entered. This action just has predefined inputs for these secrets. So I have all 4 entered. And then lastly, there's a callback URL. And what's important about this is they're going to click sign in with Twitter, takes them to Twitter's, like a Twitter webpage to actually sign in. And then Twitter's going to send them to whatever URL you tell them in the callback URL. So in this project, it's set to this page, which is specifically a Twitter callback page. And so I have it set there. So when they get to this page, there's kind of a step 2 action. So on page load, which fires right when a page is loaded, there's a sign in with Twitter step 2 action. And that action again is like comes in with the button when you drop it, and you fill out those 4 secret values again. And then it tells you in the lesson how to set these, but you pull an OAuth token that they give you from the URL, and you pull an OAuth verifier, and then you run an action. And so it seems like a lot of process, but it's actually very much like paint by number. You just go set all this stuff up. And then on this success response, which is when all that stuff works, if it works, it just opens another page in this case. And so in your application, or like if we were doing this in our test application, I would basically at this point go set all that up. I'd go to Twitter, create my project, get all those keys, come in here, add all my keys into the secrets. Oops, I wasn't in my test project. Add them all into secrets, and then create that second page, add the action. So you have to set all that up. But once you do, it's a matter of on here, they would click. I think this won't work because I don't have all those in. But they would click here, pops open a page, they sign in, they say, okay. And then boom, they're back in your app and they're authenticated.
Got it.
And you know
And
at
the
that
same-
point what, like you'll know their Twitter URL, like you can match them to Bildr. I think you get their Twitter username only by default, but you can get their email and stuff like that.
And
Right.
Drew, can you keep a user logged in? So like again in Bubble, we've got it set up so that once you're logged in, you stay logged in unless you click log out. Can we
Yep.
keep them logged in through the
Yeah,
Chrome
that's the
extension?
beauty of the way this is set up is when you click the button and it actually goes and creates a Bildr user, that Bildr user has like the normal Bildr user permissions.
Right.
So like, I'm just gonna go back to my test project really quick so I don't do anything in that pattern. But in Bildr, you can set permissions as far as stay signed in, if they need to reset their password, how long they stay signed in, that kind of stuff. It's under authentication settings. So you actually have like a lot of sections here for different things. Like this one, the session's limited to 30 days. So they'll stay signed in for 30 days. But because it's creating a Bildr user, it's like you don't have to worry. Once they authenticate with Twitter, you're just in Bildr using the normal Bildr settings, and you get full advantage of like Bildr's capabilities there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I said yeah really confidently, like I was going to set that up. I totally forgot. I have to set all that Twitter side up.
Sure.
No worries. Thanks,
Um,
Drew.
Yeah, I feel like I last time I came prepared with like a lot of stuff I was thinking about covering. This time I came prepared with nothing, and so now I have nothing prepared to cover. But I'll gladly build anything, or maybe just clean this up a little and add some stuff to it. I don't know. What do people want to see? Last time I felt like we were heavy on the layout and styling side, and we didn't fully get into like any kind of advanced actions or anything. I don't know if people want to see that.
And Drew, we got EU's back up and running. We're good to go there. Just so
Nice.
everybody knows. And thank you, Lars, for alerting us. You were the first user, and then I started getting messages. So I appreciate you letting us know. But yeah, Drew, I think you should do actions, man. Like that's where I think you should like dive into some actions, and then maybe we get into some data or something.
Yeah. So what do you think I should do? Should I make like a little CRUD app?
Yeah, maybe start off with, a basic CRUD app would be cool. Just kind of like, and talk through the, sort of like why you're doing this type of action versus that type of action kind of thing,
Yeah. So I'll set up like a CRUD app, which is a code term. If you're not familiar, it's I guess create, read, update, delete, CRUD, CRUD. But basically that's like what you would call any kind of thing where you're adding information to a database, listing those records from the database, updating those records. That's what the create, update, delete, all that. It's basically saying if you have like a list of anything, which is 90% of building applications. So to start off, I have this blank page. I'll do a quick refresher from last time. What I would do is I would add a component for the header. And I forget if we had a footer component, but sometimes you had a footer component. And so I can set this to header. Oh yeah, I saw footer in there. So I can just do a quick component for footer. And then I go section with a container every time. So there's a section. Oops, I didn't drop that right. Section, and then inside of it, a container. Now in this container, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a grid list to list the elements that I'm going to be, the items that I'm going to be adding, and I'm going to put an add button to start, and that's how I'll add a new item. So the grid list, I'll just pop it in for now, and then we'll go change some properties. So it's it's like basically blank, but it's in there. And then a button for add. So this grid list, I'm going to bind it to a data collection, which I'll create in a second. And then it's going to display a page for every row, every record in that data. So first I can add a page. We'll just call this CRUD row. I'll move it over a little. And this page is not a full it's not a full web page with a URL. So I don't need to add the header and the footer components because this is going to be displayed inside the grid. So I usually, excuse me, I usually just wrap everything in a div in that case. So I'll just put a div on the outside, and for now, I'll just put a text box in it. And then I'll set this back on our original CRUD page. I'll set this grid list in the properties, the row page to CRUD row. So you can see it repeats this text box here, which is CRUD row. Oops. And then if I preview this and right now and looked at it, it would just show a button. This CRUD row, there's nothing bound to this grid list. So it's going to repeat that page 0 times in real life. It's just showing us a little preview of 3 of them in the studio. So what I'll do is I'll set up some data that I can pop in there. So go to a data collection and just call it items. And then in this items collection, I'll just add a field called name. And in like a week, you'll be able to go in and add some test data in here directly in the studio. But today in production, I can't do that. So I'm going to use this add item to add my first piece of data. But for now, I just set that up. So I got items, I got name. And then this grid list under the data tab. Normally, if you're binding one little text box or whatever, you would bind this record value. But if you're binding a grid list, you want to bind to the whole collection. So I come to the collection list tab. I choose my collection items that I just created. And then I have to choose some amount of fields. Almost always, I'll just choose get all fields. But if you wanted, you could only pull in some fields. So that's all I'll do. And then now this grid list will repeat the page for however many items are in collections. So to start, it'll be 0, it'll be blank, but it'll work once we get some data into that database. So the final step before we test is I'll just create a quick action, which will add to the database. So if I go to flows, I see the default 3 that come with every page. Create a new one called add item. And I just say, I'll search for data create record right here. And all I need to do is choose the collection. So I want to create a new item in my items collection. And then what you can do, you don't actually even have to. You can create a blank record if you want, or you can map fields. So I'm going to map something to the name. I'll say set the name field of this new item to a text, and I'll just call it new item. That way, when it's listed here, I can display it. I'll have something as a value. And then I just, on this button, I tie the click event to that add item. So I created, it was a flow add item with one action in it, data create record. And then on this button, I tied the event add item to the click. So now this will work, and I could test it right now, but it won't update live. When I click add item, nothing will change on the screen. If I refresh, I'll see one CRUD row in here. But what I can do, oops, under page body and then data listeners, and maybe I should do this, maybe I should have done this in the next step, but this is a quick way to have live updatable data. Is I'll do a page, I did a data listener and I'm binding page binding, or I'm using the action group page binding. And I'm saying, listen to the collection items. If anything is add or removed, then trigger the page binding action. That's what a data listener is. That's what it means. And once you create it, you can edit all this stuff. Like I could say only if certain fields are changed, fire page binding. But in this case, I'm going to do only add remove. And page binding, anything you see on this left that's in purple, that means that you have data bound up here. Page binding action, or the page binding flow, is what goes through your project or through your page and finds all those data bound elements and sets the data. So if I make it so that anytime the item collection is changed, it fires the page binding flow, that means the page binding will look at this grid list, which now has changed, the data has changed, and it'll update it. So yeah, and I don't know if that's confusing or if that comes off as confusing, but the data listeners themselves are basically just like a tricky shortcut. Like it's a way to do something really advanced in real time in a simple way. So I like to show it up front. And that way, when I preview now, it'll be real time and just work. But the last step before I preview is because this page is the home page. That's what's in preview. I have to go create a URL route. So URL page routes on the left, a new one, we'll just call it CRUD, and I'll just select the page CRUD. And now when I hover over preview, I can select CRUD. So I'll preview this. So this is our header, which just said text box. Here's the add item, and there's no items listed. When I click this, one row pops in. If I clicked it again, another row. And right now they all say CRUD row because this page, all I did was make a text box that says CRUD row. But in the same way that I bound this grid up here with data to the whole collection, the page that's inside of the grid, I can bind to individual records in that collection. So if I'm selected on this CRUD row element and I come to the data tab, not on collection list like the grid, but in record value, I can say from field, give it a second. Oh, there it goes. From field, this input pops up, collection items, and then now I actually tell it which field I want to display here. So I'll say name. So it doesn't matter what I wrote in here originally because it's going to get replaced by the whatever value is in the name field of the items collection. So I come back and refresh. These all say new item because when I'm clicking add item in the action on this page, it's setting the name to new item. So if I set this to newer item and added a few, you'd see newer item. And now the next step would be on this page. I could have some way to update that value, like if this was an admin, or if this was, maybe if this was someone's profile, you could have a page like this where you're designing each piece and displaying data from their profile with this data tab. But really, the next step would depend on the application. But that'll get you, 90% of functionality in all apps is just adding and updating.
You could do, Drew, on the text box, just set it to editable. So there's like two other things that I would want to add here. One is basically you need to allow editing of some value on this row page. That row is representing one data record in the database, right? So there's a couple ways we could do it. Drew could add like an input field, and then we bind that input field to the same data point. So it would put the name of the item name inside of the input, or you can actually make text boxes editable. You just literally just toggle it to be editable. And then the last step would be on an event, you need to tell it to save it whenever something changes. So this is where things, depending on the type of element that's being modified, there are different types of change events that the browser will accept. So like on an input, there's one called change. So if it's like a text box where you're entering into the field, it would be called change. In here, we typically use blur. And there's a flow built into every page called autosave. So what autosave does is it's going to trigger a save to the database using the data binding information from that data tab. So if you have an element on the page and it has data binding, and that element also has an event where on something happening, you set it to autosave, it will go now save that value to the database. So now on the live view, Drew should be able to like click into one of the cells or into one of the elements or text boxes, sorry, that's the word I'm looking for, and make a change to it. And you can click away, and that should, blur literally means click away. Like there's focus in and there's blur out. These are just focus,
blur
names of it's just what the web standards called them. So a lot in Bildr, we just mimic whatever it is in web standards, and all of those event names are whatever it is that the specification decided to call them on the web. Some of it's like 25 years ago and it doesn't really make sense now. But we do that on purpose. So that way you can always go look up like, what is blur? You could literally just go to Google and say, what does event blur mean? And Google's going to give you information about how that works. So the key thing I wanted to make note of there was we did one side of the data binding first on the data tab, and that brings the data to the element. Then you need to tell it if you want that element to represent effective change to that data as well, which is happening through events. And the event to use depends on the type of element. In this case, it's blur. But the flow to use is typically when you've got a bound data like this, it's always going to be autosave. Okay, so that's like in is the data binding, out is the event. Like that conceptually, if you grab that in, you should be able to get it.
And this autosave, it comes on every page and you use it. But what it is it's an action called autosave. So if you do need to do a couple other things when they blur or when they change an input, you can actually put this action data autosave inside of, your own custom flow, and it'll still work and save whatever value is in the element. Yeah. What else? I feel like I should just know, like I have a million things that I always think I want to build or need to make videos for or need to show, and I'm just kind of blanking. So
I have a fun one.
yeah,
I could just build something that I've been wanting to build.
let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have this thing. Let's see. Let me make sure I pull it up here. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. All right. So let me show my screen. This is like totally off the wall, like not something normal here, but I'm making a new project on Web3 stuff. And one of the fun things I want to do is a pixel art generator. And it's basically just like you have, a grid that has a set of rows and columns in it. And then you click on one, or you select a color, and then you just like click on a cell and it changes that cell to that color, right? And then from there, I want to make an action that when you click the button at the end, you say download the image, and then later like mint this image or whatever you want. So I thought I could just kind of go through some of that. Won't be able to probably build the whole thing, but it'll be kind of a fun, totally off the wall project. I'm not even going to use any data here. I'm just going to use actions. And let me see if I even set up. I think I set up a route for this already. Pixel art. Yeah. So I had done a little bit of starting on it. So I'll go through and show you how I did that. So basically I think I did 24 by 24 here. And then I put one style class on it for hover. So that way you can kind of like see which cell you have selected there. So let's go through that part. And then what I want to do is on the right, I'll put like a color input where you select a color. And then what I'll do is make it to where when you click on one of these, it'll take that color that I set there that you selected and change the background color of that cell to the color that we've selected in the input. Then I'll kind of like go through some of the more, back and forth of using actions across pages and setting variables. Like I'll take that color and I'll set it into a variable, and then we'll actually use that variable value to set the color inside of our cell. So let's go take a look. So I'm going to zoom in here. One thing also, just before I dive in here, when I'm doing a project and there's like a bunch of different sections that I know I'm going to create, I'll go in and make these pages that are literally just for the purposes of organization. And I'll usually make a style class that's like huge studio page label, and it's like, 10 EMs or something massive. So that way I can just really easily organize around in it. Just, totally outside of what we're talking about, but I do that because when I come back into it, or if I share this project with someone, it's really obvious where to go look for things. So let's do this. I'm going to put an input element on here. So let's do, I believe we have, I think we can just change the text element. I think we have, do we not have color in here by default?
I think it's under color. Search for color instead of input.
Oh, did I just search for the wrong thing? Thank you. Appreciate that, Dorian. All right, so I've got this color input here. I'm gonna change its position. I'm just gonna do some inline styling here. I'm just gonna do like position, oops, position. And I'm actually just gonna do fixed and top of 0 and right of 0. Okay, so now let me do this too. And I am in my dev environment. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I always do it anyways. So we'll see if I break anything as we go. Okay, so I've got my nice little input over here. Like I think our live view updates aren't working in our dev environment right now. So I'll have to refresh between each change, but no big deal. All right, so now I've got this little color input, and when I click on it, I get a nice little color palette here. So let's make it so that on change, it will set a variable with that color that I've selected. Okay, so on the events for the color picker here, on the change of it, I'm going to make a new flow. And I'll call this flow change color picker. But it can be anything you want. And so what I'm going to do is set a variable. And I'm going to set that variable into the root page. The root page basically means the top level of whatever your app is in the browser. And the idea of setting it into the root is that any page, any other child pages or nested pages inside of the project can access that root variable that's been set on that page during that session. So if I refresh the page, those variables are gone. So the actions would need to run again to set the variables again. So they're session specific, only while the user is actively in there. If they refresh, they're going to go away. And if they're set into the root, then all pages can access them. So we'll start with a set variable action here. And the target page I'm going to target is the root page, which would just be the top level. And I'll call this selected color. And I almost always do camel case. I think it's just like habit at this point that I always type things in camel case. You don't have to, but that's just what I do. And then the value for this variable, I'm going to pull it from an element. So we're going to pull it out of that color picker element. Okay, so now what's going to happen is on change of the color, it's going to run this flow. And that flow is going to set a root page variable called selected color. And the value it's going to set into the variable is whatever value is in that color picker. Okay, so now it's setting it in a variable, and a variable is like a hidden value. So you won't even see it over here. Like when I'm doing it, you're not even going to know. Right? Like I just click in here and I'm changing it. It's changed, but it's setting the variable, but we're not using the variable anywhere, so we can't see it, right? So now let's go on to this pixel. So this pixel, just like Drew had that grid and it showed each data row inside of there, this is a grid, and this grid is showing these little pixels. So there's no text, there's no data, it's just the pixels. And the pixels are represented over here in the grid, and it's just basically drawing this big grid of pixels out. So what I'm going to do is on the pixel, on the div outer, we're going to make a new event on the click of that outer. So we'll say, we'll call it set color from variable. And this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this a little bit different.
Where did you hear that?
We have some questions.
Somebody at my work told me I didn't hear the news, but you should see Costco. It's turned all the way. Like I'm in the one
Someone is
Sandy Springs,
unmuted.
and it's packed all the way to the interstate down the road.
I think it was Edmund, so I muted it. So let's do a set style. So what I'm going to do is set the style property, the background color of this div to the color that is set into that variable. Okay, so if I go set style, and the element I want to set the style on is that div, and we're going to do background dash color is the property that I want to do. And the value I want is from the variable on the root page called selected color. Okay, so now when I click on this, if we go back and look one more time, when we click on the pixel, so that's the whichever one pixel we're inside of, when we click on that, it will go get the color from that variable and set it as the background color of the div. And that should be all we have to do. So if I change this to like, we'll set, and you can also change these manually. So if I do like that. So now I can just click on the different ones and it changes it. If I change the color here, so that's pretty much it. So the couple of concepts there, to take note of. One is I have these elements. I have events on the elements. Those events run flows, right? Like that's one major concept. Then there's another concept of using variables to move data between things or use data throughout your project without having to store that data anywhere. Sometimes you want to store the data. Like my very next step in this will be to make it so that when I've selected a color, I actually save that to a color palette. So that way, when I come back in as a user, I just have it already there. I don't have to like reset my colors or re-get the colors. So I will end up adding some data to this. So any questions on any of that before I can go further? I mean, like it has been an hour too. We can just call it, but like I'm happy to like just keep building. I was planning on building a bunch of this afternoon anyway, so happy to do whatever you guys want to do. Any questions from anyone?
Mark, I'm interested in you said that you could then save this as an image and then mint it. Is that what the next step would be?
Yeah, so the next step will be, I like it, John. The next step will be once you've got like, and I am not an artist by any means, definitely not a pixel artist, but it is kind of cool to be able to do, this kind of thing. So I've got all these colors in here now. So now I don't have the action in here. I have one of our devs is actually creating the action. But what you would do is I would put a button on here. I'll just add it here, and we'll just do save image. And on the click of that, we would do another one, save image. And we will be adding an action in here that is called, I think it's called image. Yeah, we don't have it in here yet. So there will be an action in here, and I'll post it in Discord whenever it's ready to go. Basically, it's create an image from any container on the page. So literally all you do is select, in this case, I would select the grid list, or really any container you want. And it's going to take the current state of that thing and create a PNG, or I believe SVG or PNG. I can't remember what we have in there. I think it actually might create PDFs too. But basically it'll take that and generate an image, and then you can do a couple things with that. You can download the image. You could open the image into a new tab. You could save the image to the database for that user to have and use. You can do anything you want with it. So that'll be the next step, but I don't have the action, unfortunately. So I can't actually do that piece yet, but probably next week, something like that. I think we actually already have it in our like areas where we play around with things, but I don't have it accessible inside the studio to use yet.
You can also do third-party library for that, Like I have a production site that does this, and I just, because the action, I didn't have the action at the time, I just went and got a JS library, and it was like a one-line thing just to save it as an image.
Yeah, I actually have one that I want to use to this one here. I'm actually going to this thing called GIF shot or GIF shot, depending on how you say it. This thing's pretty cool. It's like, it's that kind of thing. It's a, it's so old that it's like yahoo.github, which is funny. I don't know who actually did this, but it's pretty cool. You like provided a set of images and it creates a GIF for you, which is really cool. Like you set the images, set the stuff up. So one of the things I want to do in here in this project where I have like a set of things that are sort of like NFT and Web3 related is I want to do this GIF generator where you can pull in your NFTs and select all of them you want, and it'll just create a GIF for you out of those and just cycle through them. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about these things. And usually what I do, because I have access to some really great JavaScript developers, is I'll go to them and say, hey, I need this new action. Actually, a user needed one this morning in a product that they're building that they just launched. It's like a fantasy team thing. And they needed a way to, in JavaScript, calculate like nested data calculations and then push those changes all out. So I made a new action. I just asked one of my devs to help me this morning. It took him like 40 minutes or something, 30 minutes, something like that. And we published this new action out for him. So we really like doing stuff like that because like that action is now going to make its way into the group for everyone to use. So yeah, any use cases you have like that, where if you like need a save image and it's not in there, don't hesitate to ask in the Discord. We actually enjoy creating those and pumping them back out because usually you're not the only one who needs that, you know?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I'm working on a project
Perfect.
where I'm taking it a step further. There's an automation system called n8n.io
Yeah.
that gives you kind of like Zapier and Integromap, but you can like launch it on a Raspberry Pi, which is what I set it up with.
That's awesome.
So I'm able to use Banner Bear and kind of generate dynamically created graphics that can go to social media so then I could be able to have like the robot on N8N be able to push content to like Twitter or Instagram,
Nice.
Facebook, stuff like that. But now, of course, we know static images don't get the bang for the buck that they usually do. So the next move was I've been focusing for the last year on how to create some type of I guess video, but dynamically generated video. And I'd figured it out with After Effects and a couple plugins, but that gets really expensive and there's no way to scale that. So I've been looking at things, the animation stuff that's going on with, I think it's I forgot the name of it, but it's an animation script. But basically the concept is take data, merge it with an animation JavaScript library, and then render out the video. So be able to just kind of like render out this batch video, and then that could be published and scheduled, and I can make a calendar scheduler that could automatically take like quotes or motivational stuff or marketing or recipes or what have you, merge it together with like some music and some animations, and then spit out uploadable content for clients.
Yeah, for sure. If you have if you've got a library that can do, I mean, the hard part of that is the animation side, right? Like that's the secret sauce. That's the magic. All the other pieces are sort of like, you know,
well, I actually found y'all because of the Lottie files.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I found your software, because I was heading down that path and I was like, oh, these Lottie animations can get you a part of the way there. And then there's another software that actually does like it's a JavaScript library that kind of like gives you the almost like After Effects, where you can create the animations and then this export Lottie files. And then you could potentially, you know, since it's like JavaScript, be able to maybe put variables in there instead of having it hard coded.
Yeah, I think Drew, we had looked at Lottie's like really briefly several months ago. We looked at Lottie has a it's like an editor that you can embed, right? Don't they have an embeddable editor now?
Yeah, I don't know how far it goes now, but it was something they were working on where basically they're opening it up so that even in Builder we could make like an editor, but they're kind of making it like all the building blocks so that you could take a Lottie file and change stuff, like change some speeds, change some colors, whatever. But they actually had a thing where you could take a still SVG or PNG, upload it, and then it gives you like maybe 16 options off the bat of these little animations with it. And then like it's kind of intelligent, like, and it looks good. And then when you choose one of those animations, you can tweak it a little bit, like, you know, different things like speed and stuff. And then you can either save it as a GIF, save it, I don't know all the formats, but it was really interesting because it was like people would take icons that are all static, you just grab them from somewhere, upload them into this thing, and then it would make each of the icons into a little animation or a little bit of something. And it seemed very smart. Like it seemed intelligent the way that it wasn't like it was just like moving it around. It was like doing cool things. And we had talked to them at the time, and they're putting some kind of a focus on improving that and building that side out. So I don't know where it is now, but it's probably better now.
Yeah, I remember it being pretty cool looking. Like it wasn't like Drew's saying, it wasn't like a basic, you know, just kind of move a few things around on the page type thing. It was like relational to what was in the image
Yeah.
and how those things inside the image related to each other on the page. So it didn't just look discombobulated. It was moving things around intelligently to look good. I have no idea how they did that. It's kind of incredible, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a piece of software called Calvary that is, I guess, making a play to try to be an After Effects killer. And one of what it does is it can export the animations that you build. So think if you had After Effects, but you can export SVGs.
That's cool.
Or Lottie files. It can actually export entire Lottie animations. So even with push and pull, it's dynamically vector generated. It's pretty cool piece of software. But the fact that it can export Lottie files then makes me feel like, okay, in the future, because this software can control data, then those bits should be changeable via
You would think so. I mean, the Lottie file is a JSON, right? So
right,
you should be able to just.
But Lottie file is not video. That's like the missing component on your end, I think. Is like if you're talking about share images, you can't use Lottie or any.
Well, Lottie
but you're saying you can
export.
export a container, right? Because you're saying if you can export a JPEG in a container, couldn't I target a animation into a container and export that out?
Not from a Lottie, because a Lottie it's JavaScript sitting there running the animation. You know, it's like literally moving the things around on the screen.
Okay.
Inside of there. But Lottie does have an export to GIF on their site. I don't know how it works. I don't know if they have that code available outside of just their site, but I'm pretty sure if you go to lottiefiles.com and go to one, if you're a member, or I think you might have to be a paying customer. I can't remember, but you can just export from there. Oh, and John just
out. I've been working on it. I've been working on it for over a year now, so I'm getting close to it. But the biggest thing now is, since we're in this, crypto cycle, has been looking at the NFT landscape, especially the stuff that y'all were doing with the NFT manager.
Yeah, we're about to announce a bunch of stuff on that too. Drew and Michael and I have been making some good headway on different pieces there. We're excited about what we're putting together. I mean, you saw a little bit of it there where I have all those things that I was showing there. I've actually built all of those things in other projects for the most part already. And so what I'm doing is consolidating all that into a project to have this pattern that anybody can just grab and pull into their project if they want to. So that way you can just like learn all those little one-off things. Like one of those that was in there, similar to what you were looking for there, kind of. It's a little different, but we built an HTML5 canvas element where you can set a JSON array into it, and you can include images and text as part of it. So it's like a meme generator, effectively like a totally configurable meme generator. You can just like generate your own, you can create your own meme generator on your site with it. But it also has some pretty cool implications because it's HTML5, and you can do things like calculate collisions, and you can re-update objects inside of that JSON array, and it will literally move the thing in the HTML5 canvas across the page or wherever you're positioning it. So you can actually create a little game out of it, or like a side scroller. So those kind of things too, where just what we like to do is build the base element. So like this element type is an HTML5 canvas that accepts a JSON with these types of things, and it'll render it as an image, or as a set of images inside of there, all vectors. So once that's in there, then you can do whatever you want with it, right? And that's kind of the way that we play. Like we want to basically give you more and more building blocks, and try not to come too far up the stack of like full-on solutions that say like, here's the way to do it. But yeah, we're really excited about those things that we're about to announce. We're close. We're close. Got to get this production release out first before we start announcing all the new things.
Very cool.
Cool. I think we're probably good, unless somebody has something really. If you have something specific that you want to go into, I'm happy to walk through it with you, or we can do it offline as well. And hopefully next week we'll start doing some office hours for people to get some individual help in that way. Like I said, the context is everything in these projects, and it's really hard to get help without providing all that context sometimes. So let us know what you need. Really, whatever y'all are working on, we're happy to help. Chat in the Discord. It's probably the easiest way to grab us. But yeah, hope everyone had a good time. Any last questions before we jump? Cool. Well, everybody have a good weekend. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming.
you too.
Appreciate y'all.
Cheers.
Thank you.